If I could go back to 2008 when I founded my first business and talk to myself about managing my own stress and anxiety and mental health on my entrepreneurial journey, this is what I'd say. I'm Heather. I founded and scaled a 7-figure business and sold it. I then scaled an 8-figure business. And throughout that whole time, I suffered from debilitating stress and anxiety. Unfortunately, like 37% of founders. So what would I say to my younger self? For the first 5 years running my first business, I kept my anxiety a secret. And that just made it so much worse because I was putting so much energy into hiding it that I was even more exhausted. When I finally decided to open up about it and tell members of my team, it just wasn't as bad as I was expecting. They were all incredibly understanding, incredibly supportive, and many of them opened up about their own mental health struggles. Additionally, it turned out I hadn't been hiding it all that well. I thought I was hiding it, but it was showing through. People pick up on this stuff. So the lesson is, be open about what you're going through because people just aren't as judgmental as you think they will be. In the first few years of running my business, I would come home stressed and exhausted and on an adrenaline rush from a day at work. And I'd sit with my laptop and have a glass of wine. That glass of wine made me feel better in the short term, but I didn't realize that it was eroding my resilience over time. So a couple of years into running the business, I decided to take a break from alcohol, and the impact was dramatic. I felt substantially better within a few weeks, and I was just much more resilient. But it made the anxiety, it didn't cure the anxiety, but it reduced the frequency and the length of anxiety attacks. So it really was worth doing. Without alcohol in my life, the stress was just more manageable. On one occasion, I had a particularly bad bout of anxiety that lasted over 6 months, and I decided I would run a marathon to cure it. Unfortunately, that didn't work. Training for the marathon was hard. It added physical exhaustion on top of mental exhaustion. And by the time the race came, I got injured and I had even more problems afterwards because the recovery was really long and slow. I felt awful. I felt physically awful, but I also felt really guilty for having inconvenienced my whole family to train for a marathon that I didn't enjoy in the end. I used to work until the early hours of the morning and then get up at 6 again and start working. I sacrificed so much sleep in those early days of running my business, and I felt like I was being productive, but really I was putting in the hours and I wasn't being my most effective self. It was only when a personal trainer told me that he wasn't going to be able to help me build muscle if I didn't also get sleep, that I started taking my sleep more seriously. And I really benefited from that. Having a good night's sleep every night or almost every night is absolutely critical to managing stress and preventing or reducing the severity of anxiety. I have bought every wearable biofeedback device on the market. Oura Ring, Sense AI, Sense8, Pulsetto, Apple Watch, NeuroSim, Fitbit, HeartMath, you name it, I've bought the device. And the pattern is always the same. I get the device, I get excited about it, I track my metrics, heart rate variability, heart rate, brain waves, whatever it is, and then after a few weeks or a few months, I get bored, I stop, or I get stressed because the data tells me something I don't want to hear, so I stop using it. So I'm over it, and I'm hundreds of pounds poorer. And one of the things I've learned about biofeedback and wearable technology is that they override your body's natural instincts. Our bodies are incredible machines, and they have built-in biofeedback mechanisms if we just listen to them. Drink too much wine? Headache. Eat too much? Feel nauseous. Overeat sugar? Blood pressure goes up. Don't get enough sleep? Feel tired and grumpy. Our bodies communicate with us all the time. We don't need the help of technology. Your body is an amazing biofeedback device. You don't need to waste money on technology to tell you what you already know. I used to suffer from anxiety attacks that were so bad I would go and hide in the bathroom at work, and I'd just have to sit them out. I didn't know how to cope with them. But over time, I learned that there are loads of proven techniques to help you calm down in the moment. For me, I use slow breathing and havening, this sort of havening or this sort of havening. But other people use tapping, chants, humming, affirmations. Whatever it is that you use, learn a couple of these techniques because they are so useful to calm you down in the moment if you need it. So find your thing, your in the moment technique, because that will serve you for the rest of your life. My most anxious moments often happened at the times when I was the most stressed out, when everything was on top of me. And I used to think that my anxious thoughts were rational, that they had nothing to do with what else was going on in my life. I was experiencing a rational, anxious moment. But it took me a really long time to learn that you're much less likely to get into that anxious state if you are managing yourself in other areas of your life. So if you're looking after your sleep, if you're looking after your diet, if you're getting the right amount of exercise, and if you're making time to just calm down and chill, you will have fewer anxious moments and you will just be more resilient to stress. So as well as having that in the moment method for dealing with anxiety when it happens, being in a good place physically and mentally is preventative. If you look after yourself consistently over time, you will find that you are much more resilient to stress and anxiety. I have tried so many supplements over the years: mushrooms, ashwagandha, valerian root, magnesium. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And not only did none of them help with anxiety, I also wasted a lot of money, and I think some of them even did me harm. I remember I took this mushroom supplement from a very reputable doctor, and the reason I took it was because I read all this research about how mushrooms help build your physical and mental health, and there are just so many benefits to mushrooms, and I was utterly convinced by these articles that I read and these videos that I saw. So I took the supplement, I spent a lot on it, and I took it religiously for a year. And then I had one of those blood tests that tests for reactions to certain foods, and I found that my antibodies to mushrooms were off the charts. So not only were these mushroom supplements not helping me and costing me loads of money, but they were actually driving inflammation in my body, which would almost certainly have increased my anxiety and my stress and decreased my resilience. So I'm now very careful about which supplements I take. Over the past decade, I've read over 40 books on anxiety and mental health, and I benefited from all of them. I've learned a lot about the subject, but there was one book that made the biggest difference, and this is it. The book is called The Obstacle is the Way. It's not an anxiety book, it's not a self-help book, it's about philosophy. This book is about turning the obstacles and the negatives in your life into positives, and I have found it has helped me a huge amount to change my thinking and the way I frame things. I've read it 3 times and I highly recommend it. I'll link to it in the description. I used to wake up in the morning, work out in my living room, shower, get dressed, jump in a cab, go to the office, work all day, jump in a cab, come home, work from my living room, go to bed. I never spent time outdoors. And it was only when I got my dog, Devon, that I started to spend time in nature, because a dog needs to be out on walks and out in the great outdoors 2, 3, 4 times a day. This was transformational. I found that spending time with the dog and spending time in nature had a huge impact on my mood and my just general sense of well-being. I had been really nervous about the responsibility of having a dog, but I actually found that the benefits to my well-being of being outside so much far outweighed the negatives. Now, I'm not saying you should get a dog. A dog isn't for everyone, but the lesson here is get outside as much as you can. And Devon is still my dog. She's 13 now. I used to work every day, Monday to Sunday. I once sent an email on Christmas Day. I thought I was immune to stress, burnout, and exhaustion. I was so wrong. I had a really rough patch in 2014 where a series of events pushed me to the brink. I was exhausted and I realized that something in my life needed to change. One of the big changes I made was to carve out 1 day a week just for me and not for work. I turned off my phone that day, I went off email, and I spent the day doing whatever I wanted to do, whether that was shopping or yoga or going for walks, or just sleeping and watching TV. This had a huge impact because while I was technically losing a day a week of work, I was much more effective, productive, and happier on the other 6 days. And that was all down to giving myself a break. Everybody needs a break. I used to say yes to any piece of work that came my way. I was building a business. I didn't want to turn away a potential client. But then I got really, really overwhelmed. We just had too much on, and some of the work was stressful, but quite low value. I read another amazing book called Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. And from that book, I've linked in the description, I learned the incredible power of saying no. You can't do everything. So you need to be deliberate about what you do spend your time on, and recognize that your time is your most valuable asset. It is completely finite, and you need to focus your time on things that bring value into your life. I think I've learned to say no in a way that's not mean and doesn't upset people, but I don't always get the graceful no right. This decision to say no to some things created so much space for me to focus on what really mattered, which was building my business and taking care of myself. My business took off after I made that decision. So, have I cured my anxiety? No. Do I live a totally stress-free life? No. But I'm much better equipped now to cope with stressful events in my life. And I was able to build my business to the point at which I could sell it, which I did. And I completely underestimated the emotional roller coaster of selling your business. I've done a whole other video on that, so please do check it out.